This is 10X Recruiting, a podcast from Metaview. Let's get after it. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of 10X Recruiting brought to you by Metaview. Sile, you're in SF this week, yeah?
Yes.
How's the weather? Terrible as usual?
Weather? We're really going to start with weather? Nolan, come on. We're fine. Don't worry about it.
We have hard-hitting topics today, all right? So we're going to get into this. So I pinged you earlier today with our docket, and we're going to talk about AI interviewers. And so two things came out in basically the last week. So one is CodeSignal launched their agentic AI interviewers. This is like a suite of interviewers based off of different roles. The AI replaces a human and can interview in your skill set. The other one was actually a partner at Andreessen posted this learning, which is an experiment that they ran in the Philippines with 70,000 applicants. So certainly this is like for a high volume role, high volume opportunity, to where an LLM voice recruiter beat humans in hiring customer service reps with 12% more offers, 18% more starts, less gender discrimination, and equal candidate satisfaction. So Sile, are we at the precipice of AI interviewers? And is this thing going to like run rampant? Is this the next thing we're going to see?
Yes, I think that clearly it's a part of how we're going to hire, and it's going to consume a larger portion of the work that it currently does. What I mean by that is there have been like asynchronous interviews for a long time. So interviews where you would ask a candidate, hey, as part of like the application, record yourself answering these questions and send it in, and there might have been some algorithmic way of reviewing that, or at least it reduces like the calendaring and scheduling pain of having to meet with you in person. And it's always for like the lower, I guess, like I want to say like lower authority candidates. So maybe it's like volume hiring or graduate hiring or something like that. So I think for sure AI is already starting to make those far more revealing and effective. And it's starting to like move up the pyramid, I guess, into actually becoming a part of other types of roles too. It seems, I mean, it is still pretty much the reserve or the preserve of like higher volume roles. Like we have customers of ours who are using AI interviewing, not in our product. Our product doesn't offer this. They've trialed it in various parts of the business and end up in a similar to this study that Olivia shared from A16Z. They end up deploying it in like customer support and things like this. So it tends to have a bit of a home in that part of the world, but I think it's inevitably going to move up the stack. I've got like a couple of interesting thoughts about why it might not be as sort of forecastable as you expect. I think you can easily go from, okay, we're starting to use it in these roles, therefore in the future it's going to be like every role and every conversation or something like that. And there's a few reasons why that probably won't be the case, but it definitely has its place.
Okay. I want you to hit me with that take here in a second. So here's kind of like where I'm at on this. I actually feel like the prevailing narrative right now from candidates is I cannot get my resume in front of a recruiter. The prevailing narrative right now from recruiters is AI slop, too many fake resumes or fake candidates. It's just like a complete mess at the top of the funnel. I have been trying to talk to candidates about this on my LinkedIn a ton, giving people feedback on actually how to get a foot in the door to get a real interview. And if I take a step back and I think about it from first principles, it's ridiculous. Like, it's just like so ridiculous that you have to know somebody or you have to cold email the CEO. There should be a meritocratic process or, an ideal version of a meritocratic process at the very top of the funnel. And today we don't have one. And I haven't seen any tools that are really good enough at stack ranking applicants. I know some of these are coming. You'd mentioned this in the past, but for me, that's where it feels like the first application of this should be with that plus high volume. So, customer service, the example I used for a couple founders today who I was trying to convince two really smart guys to go build a business like this is like Chipotle line workers, Starbucks baristas, those sorts of roles, right? To where it's like the experience right now is terrible. It's already a bad experience. Everybody knows it's a bad experience. And so we can start there and learn there before we move our way up the stack. I think the main thing is from a company standpoint, regardless of where this experience is in the funnel, you have to be very thoughtful about the candidate experience. And specifically what I mean by that is you have to tell the candidate why we're doing this. Like, you have to explain the value proposition to the candidate. And then the second thing is I actually think you have to teach the candidate how to interact with the AI So Tiron, who's the CEO of CodeSignal, even in his demo video that dropped last week, I was kind of like, dude, you're giving like one sentence answers. Like that's not, I don't know. It didn't have the best representation for me. And so I think you really need to teach the candidate about the expectations of how you interact with an AI. Obviously, you're not giving away the answers to the test, but you're just, when you interact with the machine, it's just different than interacting with a human being.
Yeah, I sort of agree, but not fully. So I think I saw a really interesting throwaway update from a YC startup whose name escapes me right now. Unfortunately, I'll try and find it. We can put it in the show notes or something. But and they were like, hey, we've just raised this money. We're a great company, but guess what? We're not. They're not an AI recruiting company, but they're like, and we're so all in on AI. AI is going to do our hiring for us. So apply for a role here. And they use some really interesting phrases. These are like inexperienced young people, right? They're not sort of thinking about it maybe super deeply, or maybe they are. Maybe I'm not giving them enough credit. But anyway, their point was, what they said in this post was, if you can convince our AI you'd be a good hire, then we'll speak to you. And so their mental model was completely different. It was like, it's on you to figure out what this AI needs to hear. It's like, it's almost like part of the puzzle is for you to get past this stage so you can speak to me. You're shaking your head. Why? I mean, from first principles, why is that not just as sort of valid as?
Because it skips the delta between where we are today and the future. They're just moving to the future. And I get it, right? Like that in the future, it will look like that, but that's not where we are today. Where we are today is people are like, oh my God, I'm going to have to go interview with an AI seriously. That's where they're going to start. There's this term in venture capital called adverse selection, which is essentially like a fancy way of saying like only the worst people will do this experience and the best people will drop out. And so you have to overcome adverse selection today. I agree with them in the future, but that's not where we are.
Yeah. So that's the second part where I don't want to say I disagree. I just more like, hey, like let's throw this out to spar on. I think that the very binary imitation of how interviews used to happen. So interviews used to be this like, we would organize a time, we'd speak person to person and it would be like voice to voice and things like this. Replacing that like for lower sort of almost like lower power roles maybe makes sense. I think as you get up towards higher credibility or higher authority roles, higher skill roles, however you want to think about it, I think you probably don't need to be so loyal. Like essentially, it's not just you need to tell the candidate why this is an interest. I think you actually just need to you can make it a truly better experience. And that could be something like, well, yeah, of course I'm going to have the first conversation with you because based on the resume, I think this is something that you could get pumped by. And maybe once I've spent 15 minutes building rapport and got you excited about this role because I really value your time, like I don't have to be so focused on my conversation with you trying to do two things, which is like build rapport, get you excited and assess you. Maybe I just do the getting you pumped because I know that after the call, I can always send my AI agent to go and get more information from you afterwards. Like, hey, Nolan, great conversation. Listen, we didn't get to a couple of things I wanted to get to. Do you mind if I send my AI agent to go and get some additional information from you? So that's one. Like, it doesn't have to be like, hey, there used to be a stage. Now let's replace that stage with AI instead. I think you should start there because people like to sort of, it's more understandable, but in the future, it won't be that way. And then the second thing I would say is if my AI agent is now going to get information from you, you as the candidate, it's up to you what modality you want to do. If you don't want to talk, unless it's like I'm testing your speaking skills, like the whole point is AI can receive this information in whatever way you want. You can do it as text, you can do it as a voice note, you can do it as as a sort of conversational interview. You can do it as a document. The AI doesn't care. All the AI's job to do is for me as the hiring manager, to bring me back the information I need about Nolan to decide if I want to move them forward into whatever the next maybe human to human stage is. And the really important mental jump that I think we will make as a society there is you have intelligence on tap. It does not have to be in this like stage, hey, I'm going to talk to this AI for 15 minutes and that's the access to the intelligence I have. And it has to be via voice because that's the way the AI understands. No, it understands intelligence in whatever form you want to throw at it. It's going to be able to like synthesize all of that. And so I think that will just change how we use it, like much more fluidly. Modality is at the discretion of the candidate. And that's going to be a great thing. Candidate's going to love that. They're like, yeah, great. I don't need to like make sure I'm available for 15 minutes straight for this conversation. And if I mess it up, I can delete it and actually send a message afterward to correct what I was saying. Like all of these sorts of things are going to be part of that sort of part of the mix.
That's a really refined take. And I agree with you. I hadn't really thought about kind of like mixing the modalities, and that makes intrinsic sense to me. I think, okay, so for me, it's kind of like where do we start today and then how do we progress it? That's what I've been thinking a lot about. So I think today we start with high volume roles, and or at the very top of the funnel for companies that have a ton of inbound interest.
For sure. Can I just take a step back real quick? So the tweet that the A16Z investor Olivia Moore put out there was a reference to a study that, I don't know who ran the study, but I saw Ethan Mollick who does a lot of talking and thinking on AI at work. It was, like, as you said, like 70,000 candidates in the Philippines, and the AI interviewer did a better job as measured by some pretty valid metrics. Like, did the candidates they suggested to hire stick around for at least a month and these sorts of things, and they did a better job than the humans. The core thing to understand there is, I reckon that what we have right now is AI that is capable of, when you can be quite holistic in the context setting for the AI, it can do just as good, if not a better job than humans. So when you're hiring customer support reps, you as a company have probably hired so many that you literally know these are the things, almost like to within 99% of the full picture. These are the things we need. And therefore, if I can express that to the AI, it can assess it, and then it can do a better job than a human maybe at that. A lot of the roles we hire for, you don't actually have the full context. Actually, part of the assessment process, part of meeting with candidates, is to fill out the rubric in your mind about what you're looking for, which is another sort of leap that I don't think has been proven in this study. This is things where you can lay out the content, and I can express to you exactly what I want in a CS rep. And if you find me something like that, I will hire them and they will do well. Versus if you are looking for let's even just say an engineering manager or something like this. Yeah, I can sort of, there's more trade-offs. There's well, if they're strong on this, I don't mind so much if they don't have this. But if they do have this thing, then it's really important they also have this. It's more complex. Obviously, an AI can understand that. But what is probably difficult is for you to express that to the AI. And so that's the limitation you have right now. We actually are not able to express it to the AI, which is obviously one thing I get really excited about, because if you have an AI that is capturing all of that data, both around what we learn about candidates during assessment, but also how they perform, then actually the AI can surface that and say, hey, it looks like what you really need is these are the 5 different profiles that seem to work well. And it can probably express it far better than any human could in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, so essentially what you're getting at here is efficacy. And, what I think about, so at Google in 2015, when I left, I think we had 11 million inbound applications that year. And there was no world to where humans were looking at every single one of those applications. Period. It wasn't happening. And, that's probably gotten way worse in the era of AI generated resumes and one click to apply on LinkedIn and Indeed and the rest of these places. And so, yes, I do think you want to provide it as much context as possible. It will obviously be easier to start in roles in which we can very clearly define what a candidate's success looks like. But if you are Google and you have an AE or SDR or sales manager, insert role, right? Mm-hmm. Outside of basically, I think, director level plus, I'm having a hard time believing that it's not better today than just every other applicant tracking system that essentially just has chronological order. That's the problem.
For application reviews, I totally agree. Obviously the important thing in the tweets is that this is talking about hires. They based on the LLM doing the interview, they made the hire. So I think the which essentially is probably a much less thorough process that went into hiring these customer support folks in the Philippines than maybe many of the listeners of this podcast execute for their hiring. I think you're still talking about 5 or 6 hours of your most highest performers in the company running interviews to assess this, which it's not there. It's not there to do that. I wouldn't even I wouldn't, and we don't, frankly, hand over hiring of our frankly super high performing, highly paid team to AI at this point.
This is my point around the escalator, right? Is where we start today, I think is if we're talking about skilled roles in technology, the escalator begins at the top of the funnel if you have a ton of inbound. Very easy to institute it there today, to explain to candidates what's going on and help candidates actually interact with it. I think if I'm in recruiting right now and I have any sort of high volume and high inbound application, I'm doing that right now. That makes total sense. That feels like an area of experimentation. It feels like it's something I can go to my executive team and say, hey, this is how we're thinking about deploying this, because the ROI is going to be very obvious. which is we no longer have to use outbound for this role, right? Like we basically can have like maybe one less recruiter. Nobody's going through buckets anymore, and we're moving faster. That's where it starts. What becomes more interesting is then where does it go after this? I still think the companies with deep inbound applicants have a lot more leverage to experiment than anyone else. I always say like, there's 4 different places you can enter a funnel: inbound, outbound, referral, and agency. Those are the 4 places that you can come in. For outbound, I'd recently talked to LinkedIn's VP of Talent Solutions, and I saw the new product that they're launching for like automated sourcing and stuff. Kind of looks interesting. Like, we've all experienced like the LinkedIn AI slop recently with like the Right with LinkedIn thing. I think if that's not the place, right? Like I wouldn't be messing with it there. Referrals, there's not a whole lot of leverage to be had. And so in agency, we're not touching that. It really is around this inbound applicant experience and how we deploy it. I think it's going to take years before companies are really comfortable outsourcing more than, call it like 40% of a high skilled tech worker's process to AI. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think a long time before you get to up towards 40%. Yeah. And if only because of the adverse selection, I think the other, maybe not adverse selection, actually, I think the other side of it is, if every company on the planet has access to the same AI tools, there'll be some alpha you can realize through orchestrating that AI more effectively. And what I mean by that is, if you are, company X and company Y are both using an AI interviewer, but you set your AI interviewer up better, you give it better context, you give it better feedback data of how the candidates it put through performed and all these, then you will get more out of that product. And that's going to be like a real source of alpha. One of the other sources of alpha is going to be, where do you put humans in the loop? And if I'm competing against company Y and I know, listen, they're taking candidates all the way to like the final interview loop where like AI is doing most of the work, I'm just going to think, I'm going to hire a couple of people to be like all over candidates during the assessment process. AI might do some of the assessment, fine, but I'm still going to have recruiters whose job it is to make sure we have like any advantage we can during that process. So I know that's like a little bit academic because it's hard to explain what exactly we mean. But what I do think is, the top companies that are competing for the top talent will think, how can I gain alpha here? And it's going to be by having some degree of like giving customers what they want, which to some extent is going to be a human connection and a human touch. Even if you sort of fill out your application by engaging with an AI. And I actually think that's a really cool way to approach it, by the way, is actually the productized version of this could potentially be, this is an AI assistant to help you with your application. You can speak to it in whatever modality you want. It can be, you can talk to it. You can, again, as I said, you can like chat with it on Slack or whatever. But the point is, its job is to get like as thorough and as sort of well-formed a view of you into this company's process, so that they can make a like really well-informed judgment on you. And that's like mutually beneficial for both sides at that point.
Exactly. As well. Yeah, I actually think the takeaway from this is that recruiters are going to be more relational. There's going to be this aspect with the recruiter of like truly building deep relationships with people, and all of these other things like managing the inbound bucket or even outbound sourcing with what I've seen recently with a couple of different things. And you and I are going to be talking more about that in the future. I think those things are going to start to be automated away. And it's going to be like, what is the relationship with this human? Where have we identified gaps? How are we talking about those gaps? Do those gaps really matter? It's going to be, you and I've used the term precise in the past. I actually think we're going to have a much more holistic version of like, who is this human being that we're assessing on the other side? And then these are the gaps. Are we okay with those as a company? And like, as a recruiter, I'm explaining that, like, I'm actually being transparent to the candidate about what we're finding. And I think it's going to be a very interesting era that we're walking into right now. Yeah. And so I would just, again, encourage people. I was like on my soapbox last week around experimentation. Yeah. We need to be experimenting. Like, this is the stuff that you, like, if you have inbound, like a lot of inbound applicant flow, you should be testing this right now. Yeah. I'm going to throw one other, like, because I do think experimentation is the best way to answer this. It's not like, hey, us doing like a couple of Think Boy sort of like BOI. Well, another one. I would say it's also really good. And like, I see this as a big part of my job. Yes, think about what's going to change, but also think about what's not going to change. And don't like go so experiment or whatever, but like keep in mind, what do we think is not going to change? And I just believe that there's probably two things that have come out of this conversation that I think won't change. That's certainly not in like the time frame that we care about. One is
I do think that adverse selection is a really good point. I think, again, for most people, like, look, watching this, listening to this, yes, you can potentially use an AI to screen your inbound applicants. But again, like we all know that rightly or wrongly, we get most of our best hires actually come from us pulling people into the market, convincing them to be part of this process. You're not going to do that and then say, but I can't be bothered to speak to you. Here's my AI to speak to.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense. Like, that's not going to change. And then the flip side, I think the other things are not going to change. Same reason why I think that even when AI gets better at us at, we have like humanoids that are better than us at every sport, but I'm still going to want to watch the human version of the sport, is there is just potentially something primal about making connections with other humans. That is an important part of how we decide to spend our time as a professional, at least for some people. And I think that'll probably be the majority of people. So I don't think those things are going to change. I think it has got a very solid place either at the top of the funnel, as we talked about, or maybe the full funnel for more commoditized roles, frankly. But I do think those other two things aren't going to change.
I disagree. I think on the relational piece, right now it's quite transactional. Recruiting is very transactional. And I think it's going to become more relational because of the ability of AI to be our backstop.
We're saying the same thing. What I mean by that is the thing that's not going to change is that humans seek that. And right now they're not getting it, which is something AI can help with because it can take away all the other crud. But humans are always going to seek that sort of that human connection, which I know sounds super like hand wavy, but I do just think it's like I know for me it's true. So, I figure it's for others as well.